夏ぐらいだと6時半とかに、なんだっけ、でもなんか、そういう音楽があるの。帰りましょう、みたいな。
Welcome to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Yami.
And the topic of the day is childhood independence. But before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and or drop a review to whatever platform you're listening on. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, childhood independence. When you were a kid, what were you allowed to do? Today we're talking about childhood independence, and this conversation sprung up because of a new family that moved in at my parents' house, and my mom observed that children were playing around. It's basically like a closed off roundabout, and there's like a park in the center of this roundabout. And my mom was complaining to me that, oh, the kids, how the parents of these kids were letting their kids play all by themselves inside the roundabout unattended, and it was so dangerous. And I just got to thinking, like, that is an insane thought. Like, it's gotten to the point in America where the whole point of that roundabout in the center, it's like a little park area in the middle of the neighborhood. The whole point of that is for people to use it. And if there were any place in the world like that outside that would be safe, you'd think it'd be that spot. But my mom...
一つのなんかエリアみたいな感じ?
Yeah, so imagine you have a neighborhood and... oh, sorry, I said roundabout, I meant cul-de-sac. But it's like basically... there's only one way to get in and only one way to get out.
Okay.
And so it's just a neighborhood. And then in the neighborhood, there's like a little grass area in the center that is in between all the properties where any person could go and play.
公園みたいな感じ?
So the whole, yeah, kind of in the middle of a neighborhood, a park. But it's like really close to all the houses. And out of any place that you think kids could play unattended, you would think that would be it. But my mom had like, she's like sending in the group chat. She's like, well, what's going on? Like, oh, keep in mind the this family is like crazy. And I straight up told her, I was like, I think you have the problem here. Like, granted, we are in America, and for anybody who's been keeping up with American news, which I don't know, at the very least, I'm forced to do so, just passively. There's been a lot of instances. I think we mentioned one probably 2 episodes ago where somebody was shot for just knocking on somebody's doorbell. But door. But there have been a bunch of additional situations like this. I mean, it's not really funny, but I want to tell you, America's kind of a joke. So in that sense, it's funny. Where somebody was, a 14-year-old girl was shot for, it was like they were playing hide and seek or something and went on the wrong lawn, or I can't remember. They like dropped the ball on somebody's lawn and they were just trying to find it. Like the smallest things ever get you shot. So I do understand on one half my mom's paranoia.
なんだっけそれさ、確か。
Oh, go ahead.
なんか黒人だから撃たれたみたいな感じじゃなかったっけ?
I mean, it still needs to be decided in court about whether or not it's considered a hate crime. But, I mean, the chance of that being a hate crime, as far as I understand, seemed pretty high. But yeah, this whole talk about childhood independence got me thinking, when I was a kid, and like when my dad was a kid, what was it like being a kid? Like what kind of freedoms I had and were completely normal? And also what are the freedoms given to children in Japan, at least from your own personal experience? Something, I guess, before we get fully in this conversation, and another thing, I think I mentioned it one other time before in the podcast, was this notion of, if I have it written here, called adventure parks. Sorry, where is it? I wrote it here somewhere, but whatever, I can't find it.
Adventure.
But it's called like adventure parks. So they're like, normal parks are like super safe and everything's made out of rubber and they have like this specific texture on the ground so people can't get injured. And at least from my understanding, from many studies conducted on these parks, it turns out they're actually more dangerous for children. And one reason it has to do with this is when children get an idea that something is safer than it is, they end up being more careless. Whereas if something's explicitly dangerous, then they tend to be get more responsible, be more communicative with other children, and also just get a bunch of benefits. So with that all that said, I mean, do you want to give a, like I said, your perspective on things that you were and were not allowed to do, or generally speaking, how independent do you think children are in Japan?
OK。まあ、多分ね、私の世代の話なんだけど、ちょうど私の世代がね、子供携帯って言って、なんか、ガラ、ガラケーってなんて言うんだっけ？フリップフロップだっけ？
What are they
フリップ
called?
フォ
The
ン
flip
か。
phone.
そう。とかが、流行るっていうか、まあ使われてて、まあスマホはその後なんだけど。で、このキッズ携帯っていうのが、なんか、ナンバーが、まあ4つぐらいあって、真ん中になんか、なんていうの、ホームボタンみたいな、なんかそんな感じのやつ。で、なんか、1番押したらママにかかって、2番押したら、まあ、おばあちゃんとか、そういう設定ができるやつがあって、そういう携帯が、まあ、わりかし、小学生の子が結構持ってたんだよ。で、私も多分ね、小5か6ぐらいに持たされてね。そうそうそう。っていうのがありました。はい。で、遊び方っていうのが、放課後に友達と、何時に学校集合でやろうみたいな、とかあって、で、帰る時間は、鐘が鳴る時間なのね。鐘が鳴るんだよ。なんか、どういうこ
Oh,
と
the
かわか
school
る？
bell.
そうっす。
Is it?
ス
Wait,
コー、
is that the one? Or not the? You mean the one at the end of our episode? The da 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 da
それ
da
じゃない、それ
da.
じゃない。
That one?
じゃなくて、なんか、これ、季節によってなんか時間が変わるんだけど、例えば、今の時間だとね、夏ぐらいだと6時半とかに、なんだっけ、でもなんか、そういう音楽があるの。帰りましょう、みたいな。それが、まあ、6時半、6時か6時半とかにあったり、夏だとね。で、冬だと、え日が落ちる日没そうが、I'm forgetting Japanese sound が落ちるのが、もっと早いから4時半とかなんだけどね。だからよく言われるのが、その鐘が鳴る頃には帰ってきてねとか言うのね。そうそう。でもなんかね、結構今の子供たちはみんなスマホとか持ってるので、もうびっくりしちゃうよね。もう、おばさんみたいな、ちょっと口調だけどさ、今の子スマホ持って、みんなでなんか東京とか出かけちゃってね、なんかいろいろやってるけど、田舎だと結構地元の公園とか学校で遊ぶかな。で、たまにちょっと出かけたりとかはあるけど、うん。
When yeah, when you're going to and from school,
うん。
so I know there are multiple levels of what would I say walking on your own to school. So if you're very young, I guess sometimes I see the people wearing the yellow hats and they go together as a
そうね。
group.
それ
Can you explain how that actually works? Does everybody just decide to do it on their own, or is it formalized? How do people decide where to line up, and how does this whole structuring of like children walking to school work?
何登校するとき？
Yeah,
そう、なんか、
like how do people know where to meet?
はいはいはいはい、わかりました。はいはい。朝に、グループで、一つの場所に集まって、そこから登校するのね。で、なんか、住んでるところによって、それぞれ地区っていうのが、まあ、ディストリクトがいろいろあって、じゃあ、近所で住んでる人同士に、こういう班にするから、登下校は、まあ、登下校っていうのは、学校に行くときと、帰るときね。登校と下校で登下校なんだけど、登下校はこの班でみんなで集まって帰りましょうとか、そういうのがあって、で、一つの班に、あの、なんだ、まあ、いろんな学年がいるわけ。小学1年生から小学6年生までいるんだけど、まず班長っていうのが、だいたいもう高学年、シニアだから、まあ5年生、6年生が一番先頭に立って、一番、歩くとき先頭に立つのね。で、一番最後が、まあ、その次に学年が上の子が立って、真ん中は、ちびどもたちが歩くんだけど、で、やっぱりさ、家が学校から離れてる場所だとさ、 結構早くに集まんないといけないとかあるから、その班によって集合する時間が違うのね。そうね。
Okay.
そうそう。で、この時間に集まってみんなで投稿しましょうみたいな。
Okay, so that's
で、
that's
うん、
pretty structured.
そう。で、帰るときはね、まあ、1年生のスケジュールとさ、6年生のスケジュール違うじゃん、絶対。だから、
Yeah.
確かね、私の小学校は1年から3年は大学じゃない、同じクラス、同じ学年かクラスのこの中で、一つのグループ班を作ってそこで一緒に帰らないといけないんだけど、なんか確かそれ3年生4年から6年高学年だと好きなこと帰っていいみたいな感じだったのかな。
Okay.
そ
And so outside of school, so that's kind of how it's set up for school, where you have set times and locations for people to line up, and then the sixth graders lead them to school.
う、う
But
ん
outside of school, when let's just say it's like a weekend
う
or
ん
summer,
うん、
is a, let's say, elementary school student able to go unattended to, let's say, like buy food or go to karaoke?
私何してたんだろ何してたんだろう私。でも一般的にはその結構夏休みとかね、遊びに行ったりするよ、友達同士で。まあラウンドワンとかってあるんだけど、そのいろんなスポーツとかなんかゲームセンターみたいな、そうゲームセンター一緒に行ったりとか結構あるね。あ
Yeah.
とは例えばそのサッカーやってる人だったらサッカーチームとかね、水泳だったらス
Did
イミングプールとかね。そう。
yeah. Did you go by yourself though, or were you allowed to go by yourself? If you and your friend wanted, let's say, you text. I don't know. Maybe this is before texting. Like for me, this would have been. It's kind of in between. I had like a transition between using my phone and not having a phone, and then it becoming the only way you contacted with the people. But you have your
あ
friend, you and your friend, and you want to go somewhere. Let's say you're both in third grade.
うん。
Do you have
ね、
to have
う
somebody
ん。
drive you? Do you walk there? If you walk there, can you do it by yourself? How did that look like?
遊ぶ場所にもよるけど、多分、ちょっと遠い公園とかだと、親同士もなんか、その子供が遊んでる間喋ってるから、あの、じゃあ例えば私が A ちゃんと遊んでるじゃん。A ちゃんと一緒に遊んでて、その A ちゃんのママと、私のママが、うちらが遊んでる間に、なんかそこら辺でなんかくっちゃべってるみたいな。そう。と
Okay.
か、
But
うん。
is it, do you know if it's illegal or not to leave your child unattended, like
It's
walking?
not
Let's say if you sent them to get
illegal.
groceries. Let's say you're third grader. Let's say they're like, what would that be, 8 years old or something?
いや別にイリーゴではないよ。けど、それをさせる人もいるし、ちょっと危ないからっつってさせない人もいるし、まあ家庭によるよね。そうそうそう。
So would you be surprised if I told you that in the US, and not in the majority of states, but in some states in the US, I think specifically, let me double check here. I think it said Utah specifically. Let me just not call out the wrong state here, but it can be illegal to leave your children alone in your house.
なん
Does that
か、
make
いや、
sense?
それね、いや、
So
サプライズも何もなんか知ってたからあれなんだけど、まあでもすごいよね。日本より厳しいのは意外とびっくり。うん。
but just want to clarify, that's not a thing in Japan, right? Or is it a thing? Do you know? Can you
い
leave
や、
your child
多分ね、
unattended in your
違法
house?
ではない。だってお留守番、そう、鍵っ子っていうのがあるんだけど、その、両親が、共働きで家にいないから、子供が鍵を持って、帰ると
Oh yeah,
き、
you're right. That's super
そ
common in Japan,
う、そう、
actually.
鍵っ
Yeah.
子っていうのね。鍵ってキーね。で、子供は、
Yeah.
こう、鍵っ子。
They're called, I think, called key lock, or what is it called? And same thing in English, although a lock key child or something.
あ
That used to be a thing. Yeah, I think, but that's a generation before me. But yeah,
そうそう
Illinois is
そう。
actually the state. In Illinois, uh, let's say this is a legal age to leave a child home alone. In Illinois, it's age 14, and in Maryland, it's age 8. So that is crazy. So that
14 っ
means
て
if you
何もさ、それ
yeah,
さ、何大人じゃん。
that's crazy. That's like 5th grade, I think, is what this article was saying when I read it.
もしさ、そのさ、ファミリーがさ、両親どっちも働いてたらどうするの？いちいちお迎えに行かないといけない。
I'm not. I don't really know. But I mean, what would happen if they figured out that you were doing that? Is someone could call Child Protective Services, and then they could basically come over and they'd ask you a whole bunch of questions, and they'd separate you from your child temporarily, and then basically interrogate them, and then interrogate you, and then cross-check the information, and then see whether or not you're abusing your child, which is kind of insane. And that's kind of how I felt my mom's reaction. Like, that's kind of how it read to me. I'm like, people are so acclimated to America being so dangerous, because that's one of the reasons why this whole thing came. Not to get to a whole side tangent,
わかっ
but
た
and we
ね。そうだよ。アメリカだとみんなガン持ってるし、あと車で引かれるとかもあるじゃん。でも日本だと結構、そういう、もう治安がいいからさ、あんまり、まあもちろんね、変な人はいるけど、ただ歩いてるだけで、なんか狙われるっていうことは少ないから、あんまりないのかな、そういうの。
yeah, there was I think I mentioned it one other time on the podcast, but it's funny, in America there was like a thing where, what would you say, a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it technically speaking, it wasn't like crime was completely rampant everywhere and people were being extremely logical, but at the same time, it's not like there wasn't no crime or there wasn't any crime. Historically, it was like there was some crime in the cities, but then a lot of, just in short, there's a bunch of racism, there's a bunch of segregation that was happening with different house districts. There was a whole idea of like black crime or like minority crime, and then cities being associated with that. And it's like a whole story. But yeah, that, because also cars for the longest time, or for a very long time, were one of the I think leading, if not the leading cause of children deaths in the United States. That's recently been overtaken by guns, by the way. So shout out to guns, I guess. They now officially kill more children than anything else,
あ、そうなんだ。車じゃないん
including
だ。
even like yeah, even including like diseases or stuff. As far as I know, guns kill children more than anything else. That's a fun fact. Yeah, well, that's not Sekai. That's just the U.S.
It's 恐ろしい世界 in the US.
Yeah, in the U.S.
In the US.
So from my like experiences when I remember growing up, I know that, like I said, and I don't actually know how long some of these rules have been in place, but I very least know from my experience what I did. I do remember it being like, even my mom herself being more relaxed about the notion of, like, if I want to go with a friend or something, that we could just bike wherever and then basically come back. But realistically speaking, before my parents got to sleep, and that was kind of okay.
ね、そんな夜遅くに帰ってきてもいいの？門限とかないの？ Curfew.
No, at least not with my parents. Like, my mom would get more worried, but my dad was like, my dad's in his mid 70s for people knowing there, and I'm 25. So I have a very old dad. And so he grew up on a farm, and so with like 9 other siblings. And so to him, that's kind of how things were. And we don't like live in a city, so maybe they don't have this idea of like gun crime being rampant. But the thing that I actually noticed, so recently there's some events happening locally where I'm living that made it so there's a lot more people just coming in and out of town, and there are a lot of more cars coming in. And I noticed the huge increase in car traffic going in, and I just realized, I mean, everybody knows I hate cars. I've said it a billion times. We're going to talk about more about I hate cars again. Just deal with it, everybody. But my anxiety level rose like by 50%, because I'm very used to biking around, but when cars are literally everywhere and every single street is just lined up with cars, and you have to be so hyper aware of it, because on any street you could just die. And I'm just like, and I didn't realize, even for somebody who's been biking as long as I have, especially in carbon America, I realized that anxiety that got to me. And then another thing I noticed as well was we have a small dog, and like, the thing I was thinking was, this dog can't really hurt anybody. Her bite is so weak that it couldn't damage a baby, basically. And so like even so basically I was thinking the only reason that we can't let like the dog or this dog or my dog out on just outside roaming is in the back of my head because I'm thinking that they'll be hit by a car. And I think the same thing applies to children walking by themselves or pretty much like most anybody unattended who's not a child. And to me personally speaking, I'm more, if I was a parent, I would be more afraid of them getting hit by a car accidentally than them getting attacked. I mean, depending where we're located and living in, but at least where I'm living in.
なんかさ、私知ってんのか、なんかYouTuber でなんかそのアメリカに住んでる人がいるんだけど、その人、子供いるのね。で、言ってたのがもうアメリカだとどこ行くのにも車が必要だから、例えば、登校するときも、親が、学校に送りに行くんじゃないの。送り迎えは全部親がしてるから、
Yeah,
なんかもう、
that is very,
そうだよ。
very true.
なんか、
I believe we
登校
even
で、
mentioned that one other time.
登校で歩かないよね。
Oh, and that if you're wondering, that persists indefinitely. So you say like kids, but the thing is, I mean, if you know people, and this is pretty common actually, because people aren't super rich, or not, at least not everybody is.
それかバスか。
So even if your family has one car,
うん。
which is an assumption I think you can make in America because you need one.
うん。
You can't. If you have a family of 4 or 5, not everybody can use the car at the same time. So basically, everybody's locked down by whoever's currently using the car, which gives parents a extreme amount of control over where their children go and everything that they can interact with. In a weird way, it's kind of like living inside a jail cell, and they're like the jailkeeper, and they get to decide when you can interact with the outside world. Like for your what's it called?
なんか、こう、なんだっけ、そう、なんか子供同士のデートにも、その親がさ、ライドギビルライドしないといけないから、結局、なんていうの、一ついいのは、なんだ、自分の娘のボーイフレンドと、なんか、いろいろチャットとかできて、仲良くなれるけど、でも、なんていうの too involved しちゃうから、ちょっとあれだよね、みたいな話はしてた、そのやつは、そう。
Yeah, I've heard a lot of like obviously I think parents develop parent brain when they become a parent, but and I don't know if this is considered a normal thing that we've just accepted because all the parents look at each other and think it's a sane thing to say. But I've been hearing a lot of discussion just because I don't know, I listen to much American politics about parents should be able to have the right to control what their kid learns and interacts with and how they engage with the world. And I just don't fundamentally agree with that. I feel like if you have full control over all the things that your parent can interact with, and the thing is that's considered being a good parent is having full control. I mean, and maybe you know what, say whatever you want. To me, it's like, you know, and I'm not even going to the religious thing here. I'm just saying I'm not a huge fan of religion. We'll leave it at that. But the notion of you have a child who is going to be a part of this world or this community and society, and you can just hinder them and kneecap them intentionally and refuse to give them any information or access to the information outside world, to me is kind of insane. And I know a lot of people think that's normal. Oh, that's what getting a parent is doing. That's the role of a parent. But I'm just saying, I think it's kind of crazy, especially when, like I said, in America, not only can you like control, I mean, all the stuff a normal parent can control, which is like when they can get food, maybe other stuff surrounding their, let's say, bedtime or curfew. You can also just control, do they get to interact with literally any other being in the planet because they can get in the car, or can I refuse them getting any interaction with anybody by just not giving them a ride anywhere? Okay, speaking of which, are you, so I think we've talked about this before, but how is, does it ever happen when you're going over to someone's house and the other parent isn't there, like asleep? I think you said no to sleepovers, but for example, you go to someone's house and your parent doesn't follow you, so you're just under the supervision of the other parent. Is that common in Japan?
もしあるとしたら、it's under the other family の parent のその なんていうの監視か。
jurisdiction. Yeah.
そう。
But does that actually happen though? Is what I'm asking?
ね、そういうスイープオーバーする人にとっては、だからなんていうのお世話になる、行く、そこ、スリープオーバーする家の親が、ちゃんと見てるんじゃない？さすがに子供同士だけ。
I guess I'm trying to get an idea of I've described how I kind of view in my head American parents being very very overprotective, and I think they're called helicopter parents. So it's like they're always above their
ああ、
child,
そういうことね。
getting ready
いや
to
じゃ
drop in and
だって
save
違う
them.
違う、あれだよ。
Do you
だって
think the average
スリー
parent is a helicopter parent in
だ
Japan?
から違うよ。だってスリープオーバーするんだったら、だって家でやるじゃん。家でやったら絶対ペアレンツいるじゃん。
Oh, no, I'm not talking about in terms of just a sleepover. I'm talking about in general. So there's some things like that we've talked about before that give me the impression that there's more responsibility given to a Japanese student or like just a child. One, they can like walk back and forth to school by themselves. Two, they can go out and shop for stuff, as you said. Three, they're expected to clean up at their school in class by themselves. But my question to you is, do you actually think the parents are doing that voluntarily or they wish, do you know what I'm saying? Do you get the vibe that parents are like in their heads they're trying to be as controlling as possible, or they're more lax with their children?
いや、心配は
Like, what do parents worry about? If you're a Japanese parent of somebody, what are your concerns, your primary concerns for your child?
私がもし親だとして、子供がいたら、なんだろうね。キッドナップはたまにされるからさ、それは困るよね。けど、なんかそういう登下校するときに一応、なんていうの、交通指導員っていう人がいるの。その下校の時間に、見守りしてくれる、なんかおじさんおばさんがいいんだけど、とか、あと学校の先生とかもたまに、一緒に帰る道に立ってたりするんだけど、そういう、なんていうの、スーパーバイズがあるから、先生じゃない、親も安心っていうのもあるし、あと一人では帰らないね、低学年のうちは。
What about curfews?
Curfew は、
is that common? Or do you like, you know what I'm saying, middle schoolers or high school, or yeah, I mean even high schoolers just like do whatever they want and then come back?
ハイスクールはそんな門限はさすがにあるけど、例えばディズニーランドとかね、行った後に、うちの親はなんていうの、さすがに11時12時はダメだけど、そのディズニーランドが9時に閉まるのね。そうすると家着くのだいたいもう10時とか11時とかなっちゃうんだけど、そういうのは別に大丈夫だったかな。でもたまにその警察が見守りじゃないけど、なんか駅の近くに交番があるのね、大体。で、ちょっと制服とか着てたらさ、明らかにさ、学生だからさ、ちょっと君たち何歳でどこ行ってたのみたいなちょっと聞かれるけど、そうでそれ多分、ね、
That's why I was wondering about the laws regarding that, because I know that police officers step in a lot, but from my understanding is I think they just do so on like a personal, I don't even know how to describe it. When I was looking into it, I don't think they're legally have to do that, but police officers almost serve like a community helper role as well in
そうそれもある。
Japan.
なんか一回なんかディズニーの帰りかなんかかな。
I mean, or just they're assholes, but
そうなんかそう遅く帰った時があって、その時多分制服着てなかったんだけど、なんか何歳でなんでこんな遅くまでいるのみたいな聞かれて、私何歳って言ったかな忘れたけど、なんかそんなトラブルにはなんなかったけど、でも警察は結構見張ってるっていうか、その未成年が夜遅くまで出かけてるのは見張ってる。
Will you ever be like, if they found you and they don't have your parent on you, they'll hold you and then like try to contact your parent to get you?
多分そうすると思うよ。
Oh God,
たまに
I
さ
hate that.
ヤンキーとかの人はさ、
That's happened to me before and I hate that.
そうヤンキーとかたまにいるからさ、そういう人はね、やっぱ夜遅くね、なんか暴走族と一緒になんかバイク乗り回して。
But 夜遅く, how do you define that? How late?
I don't know. 11, 12とかじゃない？夜。
Yeah.
そんぐらいだ
I
か
mean,
ら、そう。だからもし、見た目がめちゃめちゃ若くてとか制服とか着てるんだったら、夜遅くに出かけてると、たまに警察の人に止められちゃうから、ちょっと、ね、気をつけた方がいい。
yeah. Well, let us know what you guys, I guess, your own personal experiences. I'd be curious to see what do you think about the current situation of, I guess, what did I say at the beginning of the episode? There we go. Independence, childhood independence in your country compared to now to when you were a kid. I'd be very interested in hearing that. 戻りました。
We're back.
今週、新しい動画がついにアップロードされました。おめでとう、私。
Yeah, you guys watched already?
見たのかな？今の時点でうまくいってるんだけど、その視聴回数。だけど、この動画、まだ見てない人なら、全然気にしなくていい。ネタバレしたくないから、その動画の内容について話さないけど、ちょっとだけその関わってる内容について話すけど、私があゆみに聞きたいことがある。そのコメントをいろいろ読んで、動画にちょっと答えなかったことなんだけど、あゆみに、聞きたかったんだから、
Okay,
これから
3
3つの質問を聞く。まず、どうやって日本語のキーボードを覚えたの？その、日本語のキーボードというのは、その10の、なんていうか、10のボタンで、その、あいうえおの書きくいこみたいな。それなんていう日本語で、そのフリックキーボード。
フリックのやつでしょ？
そう。
I don't know how to say it. フリックのやつ。
フリックキーボードだと思う。
なんかね、yeah. There is a terminology for that.
スワイプキーボードというのもあるんだけど。
But yeah, so how I remember, how I like learned how to use that. I don't know myself. I don't use that like often, so I'm not sure if I'm like a good user with that.
でも、そのメッセージ、LINE してるときにそれ使うでしょ？
I guess, I don't know. I use English keyboards recently, so I don't know. Like, yeah.
recently.
But anyways,
どういうこと？
I mean, like when I talk in English, I will use the English keyboard.
そう。だけど、日本語で書いてるときという話。
Sometimes, yeah.
誰リル何？
I think I'm using that. Okay, so I think at first I was struggling how to use it, but like as you experience it, you learn. Practice makes perfect.
でも、いつ習ったの？で、なんか最初に習ったのはどっち？なんか携帯のアプリをダウンロードしてから、最初に出てくるのは、その日本人が使うやつ？それとも、QWERTY？
QWERTY ってなんだ？
そのなんか、普通の英語の QWERTY、QWERTY という、なんか私が持ってるキーボード。
ローマ字入力ってこと？
そうかな。
I guess you can choose かな。It's a, なんていうの？ preset or
そう、プリセットは何？
プリセットはね、フリックかな。If I remember right.
なるほど。
Or
それでみんなが使ってる。
Yeah, I don't know. So like, at first I was like, what the hell? Like, is this thing? But like, as you use it, you will learn. So yeah.
じゃあ、2つ目の質問は、りという、これりで、か、どっちでもいいんだけど、そのひらがなに関して、その私がひらがなを思うといつもりとかは RI、かは KA。ということで、その他のフリックキーボードは難しい。私にとって。なんかローマ字として思っちゃうから。でも自分から見ると、どうやって、なんかローマ字を見ると何を思う最初に？なんか頭の中で。なんか、か思うと、2つの字がなんか一緒になってるとか、それともかはか。なんかわかる
？Yeah, so like the
なんか私にとってひらがなはいつも2つの文字の合わせ。
Yeah.
なんか一つの文字として考えられない。なんかわかる？
ローマ字、
なんか頭の中でそのローマ字とひらがなどっちが正しい、自然、自分にとって。
What do you mean
な
when
ん
you
か
type?
D を自分の頭の中で RI と思うか、それとも D はひらがなだけで D。
When you use the ローマ字 keyboard, then ローマ字
い
will
やいや、
pop in
使
your
ってるんじゃな
mind.
くて、なんか、そういうこと？
Yeah, and then when you're using the kana keyboard, then D will be in your mind. So like it's not like like which is which. I mean like which came to your mind. It's just like something naturally like pops
考
in your
えずにできるっ
so
てこ
so
と。
brain. Yeah. Yeah.
でも、なんか、
Unconscious thing.
どうやって説明すればいいんだろうね。まあ、多分外国人、まあ、少なくとも英語がなんかネイティブの外国人だとこういう問題抱えてると思うんだけど、私みたいにいつもなんか何でしたっけ、日本語の50音でしたっけ、その50の音がある日本語の中で。でも、その音を聞くときにいつもそのままで聞くんじゃなくて、なんか存在しない、日本語の中で存在しない、なんか R とか RA is not da. Sorry, da is not RA. Da is 何でしたっけ、逆になってる。Da is not da. Da is actually R plus A とかが頭の中にセットされてる。
I don't
ごめん
know
ね。
what
これはちょっ
you
と
mean.
変なアメリカ人の考え方だけど、
Yeah,
まあ
just-
最後の質問に行きましょう。LINE 以外の SNS は使われてるの？それで使われてるとしたらどうやって使われてる？
Okay, so like for like communicating communication は like we use Line だけど for social media we use Twitter, Instagram, and sometimes Facebook, but mainly Instagram or Twitter, or sometimes like I don't know about TikTok, but yeah.
でもソーシャルメディア、例えばインスタだとそのメッセージ
Yeah,
の
we
機能
can
はあるでしょ？
message, but like
でも LINE を
mainly.
使うときとインスタを使うときの違いは何？
So for Line, it's like normal conversations, like like あと事務的な like miscellaneous things だけど、
うん。
if it's like so let's say you post a picture of your trip on Instagram, then you get a reaction from someone, and then
うん。
that reaction it's on Instagram. So like when someone wants to make a comment on your post, then they will give a comment on Insta, or like a direct message on Insta. But for
なる
like
ほど。
normal
でも、
conversations, online?
でも、DM から始まる話はなかなかないってこと？
I guess like not for me. Yeah. If I
で、
only have the if I only have Instagram account, then I will use Instagram だけどね。So like when I want to talk to Joey, but Joey only has Instagram, then I will talk to you on Insta.
うん。
だけどbasically we use Line for communication.
で、まあ、そのある結果によると、まあ、リンクはないんだけど、でも調べたんだけど、その Facebook は3代と4代の世代、人が使われてると、なんか 30% ぐらいと書いてあるんだけど、どう？なんか Facebook の役割は何？
I guess
LINE と同じ？それともインスタと同じ？
I don't know. I don't use Facebook だから I'm not sure if I can qualify
で、
to
Facebook を
make a
使ってる
comment.
人を知ってる？
Yeah. Some people have it, and especially like, how do you say? If you want to like be friends with friends, then it's better to use a Facebook because on Facebook it says like you might know this person because this person's friend is this person. So like they would suggest that you should be friends with this person.
なるほど。で、最後聞きたいことあるんだけど、まあ、友達作りという機能、その Facebook の機能に関しては、例えばインスタと同じ、LINE がないからインスタで DM してるってこと？
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Or
でも、もうすでに持ってる LINE の人だった場合、インスタを使う？それとも LINE を使う？
I mean, like it's let's say like if I make a post or like a story saying that who wants to hang out tomorrow, and then someone reacted to my post or story, and then replied to me, and then if someone does that, I will respond on Instagram because someone contacted me on the post on Instagram. So I will do the same on the same site.
なるほど。
Yep.
まあそれコメントでいろいろな人と話したんだから、多分その人はこのポッドキャスト聞いてないと思うんだけど、一応今まあ一つの質問でも答えられたら幸い。
I mean, it's like it's not like a Japanese thing. It's kind of worldwide じゃない how to use Facebook or like Twitter, Instagram.
まあ一人の人がFacebook は例えばLINE の役割は何とかで、まあ私の友達その人が私の友達全員 Facebook メッセンジャー使ってると言った。
so Facebook Messenger
今まで LINE 使ったことない。
そう、
今まで LINE 使ったことないと言ったので、どうやってLINE はどの役割、例えばアメリカだと全然他のアプリを使わない。ただ、まあメッセージに関しては、まあ少なくとも私と友達と、まあほとんど知ってる人だと、ただ自分の携帯の元々のメッセンジャーを使う。アプリじゃなくて、まあすでにダウンロードして、
we don't use iMessage とかだね。for iPhone だと iMessage がlike preset であるんだけど、we don't use that. But sometimes, people use that. Yeah, I don't know, like it depends on the person.
で、最後に言いたいのは、母の日、おめでとう。まあ、おめでとうというか、みんなの母へ、パチパチ、よくできました。
Mothers in the world.
まあ、最初のセクションに関しては、ちょっと母というか、いろいろな母さんを怒らせた可能性があるけど、一応、よくできてるかな。
そうね。All the mothers が、なんていうの、can have a happy life を祈ってます。
And we're back with the final section. And if you made it to the final section, you should send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a question language related and or otherwise. And this week we have 2 questions, and the first one is from Trevor, and it goes, how do you both feel about Jico Bukken? Would you live in a house where someone has died? For me, it all depends on the context. If someone happened to pass away of old age and was found the next day, then I don't think I would have any problem living in their house, and even sleeping in their room. However, if that person was not found for days, months, or years, or if it were a tragic incident, I would feel uncomfortable. Once when my family was looking for a new house, we checked out a home in a woodsy area, and my dad's ESP, extrasensory perception, sixth sense, started to go off, so he wasn't enthusiastic about the place. It wasn't until after everyone got excited about the house that a realtor found out days later from the other realtor of the home that the elderly owner had an accident and wasn't found until weeks later. It made my parents uncomfortable, so we decided to continue our house hunt. Thank you, Trevor, for the comment. I mean, how do you feel about Jico Bukken?
いやー、もし住みたいか住みたくないとかって言われたら、もちろん住みたくないよね。けど、
okay, let's assume Juki Buken. Oh, sorry, Jiko Buken. Let's assume at the very least you're getting a 50% off.
いや、50% off。それが worth it かどうかは、その物件によるよね。もしさ、なんか古びた、なんかぎっしぎしの、なんか木造の田舎のアパートでさ、半額ですよって言われても行きたくないけど、それが綺麗で、東京のど真ん中にあって、でもちょっと事故物件なんだよねって言われたらちょっと考えるかもしれない。他のとこが
Okay,
な
hold
く
up.
て。
I'll give you a bunch of different scenarios, and we'll answer one by one here, so we'll get an idea. So take your Tokyo apartment. So you have it's great. It's like a perfect one. Okay, so you're told the last owner died, but they died of a natural death. And they were an old man. They
Unnatural.
passed away. Natural.
natural。そしたら、まあ、別にいいんじゃないの？
Okay, so let's say that they committed suicide.
ちょっとスーサイドって言われるとなんかね、なんか他の場所
Does it matter how they did? Like, let's say they took they took a pill of medicine. They didn't hang themselves or something. They just took like a pill or something. Because in my head that changes it. You know what I'm saying? In my head, I can imagine the noose coming from the top of the ceiling.
確かにね。多分ね、なんだろう。多分、その事故物件ですって言われて売ってるとさ、なんかそれを想像しちゃうじゃん、やっぱり。ちょっとこの部屋で亡くなったんですよねって言われると、どうやって亡くなったんだろうってもう頭の中で考えちゃうじゃん。多分それがさ、自分の健康にとって悪いと思うから、多分住みたくはないとは思うかな。
I didn't think we'd have the same exact opinion on it. So for everybody there who hasn't guessed this point, I'm not superstitious at all. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm not religious either. Nor do I believe in spirits, juju, karma, and anything you could possibly put at it. But I would feel uncomfortable with Jiko Bukken, or depending on the context. Depending on the context, really. And honestly, even if it was just a natural death. And the reason is mainly because of what you said. If I don't know the information, I don't care what happened in the house. But the point that I know the information, especially if it's the room I live in, you know what I'm saying? All I can do is it bums me out. I'm like, because you know what I'm saying? I'm like living, I'm doing well, and I'm thinking, wow, somebody who's in this space, maybe not this bed, but like where the space I was, even if it was a natural death, is dead. Or they died, and this was the last place they were in.
そう、なんかそっから考えを巡らせちゃうから、そう。
Yeah.
ね。
And especially if it was actually something bad. But you know what? If it was I'm trying to think, what would I mind? If it was something badass, okay, if you know what it was, if it was a castle, if I was living in a castle and I heard that the dude who died here fought off 300 men or something coming through the castle with one sword, then I think that's cool. And that gives me positive association. But it's all about the story. I want to have a positive image of somewhere that I'm supposed to be in. And it doesn't have to do with spirits, whatever. It literally just has to do with, it's like the pink elephant thing where I don't know if you talked about the podcast.
考えるなって言われると考えちゃうよね。
Yeah, it's like, don't think about a pink elephant. And then everybody who's listening to this is probably not trying to do so. And in that effort, they are thinking about a pink elephant. So if it's like, I want the discount from the Jiko Bukken, but I don't want to know that it is Jiko Bukken, because then I have to know what Jiko it was. You know what I'm saying? I need to know the accident. I need to know all the details.
もしそれがなんか訳ありなんか事故じゃなくて訳あり物件だけしか書いてなかったらまあちょっと、考える。でもね、訳ありって言われたらなんで訳ありなんですかとか聞いちゃいそうだけどなんか本当に何もなくてただ 50% オフってやったら多分いいかもしれないけど、
You know what it is? I figured it out. You find out what room they died in, and then you physically just cut off that room and move it somewhere else. You just
どういうこと？
If you just find out the room, like if they hung themselves in one room, you just ask them to just cut that part of the house off. And then you just physically blow it up. And then you're good. We don't rebuild it, because then I'd think of you know what I'm saying? Maybe it's not worth it at that point. It's not a good deal. But yeah, those are our thoughts about what are like 事故物件 in English? Accident houses that have
how do you say?
accidents in them. I'm not sure. Like bad accident discounts. I'm not sure. But next comment from Oddity, our MVP commenter. Hayes, I had read a bit about this free housing thing in Japan, so it was very interesting to hear how it works. I follow this photographer on Instagram, and he often takes photos of abandoned houses in the wilderness, and I've always wondered how come there are so many of them in Japan. I assume it's people who've passed away and have no relatives, so their property just stays abandoned. Israel has a similar problem, with most of the population concentrating around Tel Aviv. Its solution to spread out the population was to force high-tech firms, through various incentives, to build offices in peripheral regions, and then people naturally move there because of work. If Japan added that to the mix, it would be irresistible. Though I'm already pretty sold with the introversion amenities you mentioned. Thank you for the comment, Oddity. What I will say, it's like, what could you offer? That the thing about Japan, and I think I mentioned this about America earlier though, is you can offer a lot of cool incentives in America for some rural locations, like even tax incentives, and people do that. And it kind of works because all of the people who live in that area have to kind of buy things in that area. But in Japan, it doesn't really matter where you live. I mean, it does to an extent. I'd say if you're over 2 hours out, you're probably not going to Tokyo. But the thing is, if you're even 2 hours by train away from Tokyo, you're going to Tokyo because everybody goes to Tokyo. You know what I'm saying? You were talking about last episode about how the majority of people who I said live in Tokyo actually live outside of Tokyo. And so even if you had people develop in like 3 prefectures around Tokyo, your business would probably being affected by Tokyo.
そうだね。
Which is so weird to think about. That's like me I'm in Idaho and my business is being affected by like Minnesota or something. Which,
でもね、あれだよ。
no, it's not that far. It's not that far in distance, but I'm just saying in terms of Japan.
だってプリフェクチャーがさ、ちっちゃいのもあるよ。からさ、行き来しやすいからそうなんだけどさ、例えばさ、まあカリフォルニアがさ、多分そこら辺で一番でかい都市じゃん。
Yeah.
だからさ、わざわざさ、なんていうの、アイダホからカリフォルニアに通勤してる人いないわけじゃん。だってそれはでかくても一個のステートがさ、州がでかすぎてさ、通勤しようがないからさ。ね。だから、
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
So,
well, I mean, also I would say additionally, I mean, it's not that I think that's a bad idea. And you know what? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the government has tried to do something to encourage people, to go out. I know like I said, there's this program right now. They also offer, if you're a parent, they'll pay you a certain amount, like a stipend to raise your children in a different prefecture, like from one in a given list. I have never heard about an industry push thing that you're talking about. But it'd have to be such a big incentive because, okay, ignore my comment about like your consumers, like being affected, like generally by living around Tokyo. You have to offset the amount of straight up just people they have. So Tokyo, for everybody that needs to know, that probably already knows, is the densest city in the world. It is there is no city denser than Tokyo in the world. And that's like foot traffic. So if you're going to try to compete, like what? We'll give you a place in Hokkaido, but we'll give you $500 a month. Like that's not going to compete with Tokyo. You basically just have to float the business. Like the government is just like the business doesn't have any customers, but they're just float. I mean, maybe that might be worth it in the long run, and I don't entirely know the Israel situation as well to comment on maybe why that might have been affected over there. But like, and I think that's actually a good idea. But the power of Tokyo is crazy. Like I said, it seems so wrong for people to be commuting, out of state. It's like it's suffering from its own success. Public transport is good, so people can go to Tokyo. And Tokyo is good, so people go to Tokyo. And both those things together mean that Tokyo is like a black hole.
全部吸収しちゃって。
Yeah. The one way to solve this problem, though, now thinking about it, is if Tokyo gets so big that it encompasses all of Japan. then
全部が東京になっちゃうの。
Yeah, so imagine if Tokyo, like an infection. If Tokyo keeps spreading and gets bigger and infects all of Japan, you no longer have to
じゃあ
worry
日本が
about.
東京になっちゃうじゃん。
Yeah,
でも
but
北海
at
道は
the
さ
very
すがに
least
な
it'll
んな
be
いんじゃない？だって
populated.
海挟んでるし。
Well, no, it's like a plague. You know what I'm saying? They build like a bridge. They to Okinawa.
They have bridge だけど、ね、
What?
今
They have an underground bridge to
そう
Hokkaido.
そうそうそう、アンダーグラウンド。あ、タノーか。そう、ブリッジじゃないけど。
Oh, tunnel. Yeah.
そう。そう。
Did I just
ね。
construct what a phonetic? Yeah.
ね。
Oh yeah, if people don't know about that. Yeah, there's an underground tunnel going from
そう、
Tokyo
青
to
函トン
Hokkaido.
ネルっ
It's
ていう。
really
そう。
sick.
うん。
Yeah, you should look it up. The pictures are crazy.
うん。
Oh, and I think it's actually the longest underground tunnel in the world. Not that I know how much
あ、
competition
そ
there
う
is
な
for
の？
that, but
へえ。
I think it is. Yeah, it's
ね、行ってみ
huge.
たい。
It's very wide too.
へえ。
But what was the comment even about? Oh, it was just talking about abandoned homes. And yeah, I mean, we kind of went on a. I mean, I think we were on topic, but yeah, thanks for the comments so much. Yeah. That bell means we've reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us in another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com, and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And your favorite Ayami.
Signing off. じゃあねー。
じゃあねー。